56,000 BC, which strangely enough correlates to Egyptian texts themselves and to references in the Vedas that talk about the establishment of Vedic civilization around 40,000 years ago. Egypt as an exemplar of the Kali Yuga, or of the Yuga cycle in action, is a very, the picture is worth 1,000 words, they say. I don't know if it's worth 1,005 words.
At the temple of Seti I at Abydos, there is a wall with a long horizontal line of inscriptions that list the names from the 1st dynasty to the 19th dynasty. On this wall, 2,000 years of successive pharaohs are documented. On the opposite, eastern wall, the names of an additional 120 kings are documented, reaching as far back as the supposed Zep Tepi. Yet this record has been ignored, buried, and nearly forgotten. A list of records compiled by Manetho, high priest of Heliopolis, speaks of a prehistoric era that was ruled by gods and demigods, known as the Neteru, which supposedly existed until the reign of Horus. The Neteru was succeeded by a solar cult known as the Shamsu-Hor. The same reference appears in the Turin papyrus, referring to the Shamsu-Hor as the Shining Ones, who existed in pre-dynastic times. The Shamsu-Hor translates into the followers of Horus, and appears to be a cult that preceded the great dynasties of Egypt. According to Manetho, these followers of Horus were said to rule until King Menes unified the lands of Upper and Lower Egypt. The successors of King Menes were the kings of dynastic Egypt, beginning in approximately 3150 BC. Who were these two mysterious groups that existed beforehand? And could they have been connected to the Eastern Wall at the temple of Seti I? There is an illusion that somehow we know the Egyptian culture better than the Egyptians. We have attempted to frame their knowledge and understanding within the context of our own civilization. For once, let us examine the texts at face value, the way that Egyptian builders, designers, and sculptors intended. The Turin papyrus has been badly damaged over time, but the final 2 lines of the section describing the Shamsu-Hor read, "Venerables Shamsu-Hor, 13,420 years. Reigns before the Shamsu-Hor, 23,200 years. Total, 36,620 years." We can either take this document at face value, entrusting that the Egyptians were competent enough to write their own legacy, or we can dismiss this finding as simple mythology. How does this passage relate across the entire body of Egyptian text? Several Egyptian texts speak of a time when the gods ruled the earth, a golden age where all was in perfect harmony. The Golden Age, Zep Tepi, the first time, was an epoch sacred to the Egyptians. In their view, Zep Tepi was an actual historical event that was documented accordingly through the Sphinx and the alignment of the pyramids. It is easy to categorize this as Egyptian mythology, much like the Greek accounts of Zeus, Apollo, and its mythical beings. However, unlike Greek accounts of mythology, we have bodies of texts that refer to this special first time, and precise astronomical and structural alignments to confirm it. The pre-dynastic Egyptians may not have been gods, but seemed to have possessed the knowledge of gods. Zep Tepi is supposedly marked by the time where the stirring of the high god in the primeval waters to the settling of Horus upon the throne and the redemption of Osiris. The most critical events of Egyptian mythology took place during this epoch. Zep Tepi was alleged to take place in the triangular region north of the tip of the Nile Delta. The cities of Heliopolis, Memphis, and Giza were regarded as key cities during this time. Osiris, Horus, and Ra-Atum were the primary deities that played a pivotal role of this epoch. If we are to interpret this astronomically, this would mean that there was a special alignment that took place involving Orion, the Sun, and the Sphinx. The Edfu texts make reference to a specific date in the Egyptian calendar, the 1st of Tibi, the first day of the 5th month. On this day, the text states that a massive battle took place where Horus was officially crowned as the first king of Egypt. Our current understanding of the Egyptian civilization was compiled by 3rd century historian Manetho. The conventional view argues that the epoch of ancient Egypt was a period spanning from 3100 to 332 BC. This conventional view dominated until sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey pushed the origins of megalithic architecture back by 7,000 years. With this in mind, we can at least assume that the period of Zep Tepi was a tangible window of time, going back before pre-dynastic Egypt. There is an old Hermetic text, the Sacred Sermon, that talks about men who lived before the flood, whose civilization was destroyed. It hints at a large cycle, and of cyclic gods that would be destroyed and remembered only by their handiwork before they would be renewed. Cyclic gods? A rhythmic wheel? We often associate Egyptian civilization with the pyramids, the Great Sphinx, tangible structures. So who were these individuals, and what do they have to do with Egypt? Myths about large cycles of time have been found in various religions throughout the world. The Hindu religion speaks of yugas, with the great year being the complete cycle of 26,000 years. Buddhism speaks about kalpas. One kalpa is 4.32 billion years, also called one day of Brahma. The Satya Yuga, or the Golden Age, is seen as the time of the gods. The length of these cycles does not matter. What is important is that these ancient religions all mention the cyclical nature of different ages, a concept that came to an end with the big three monotheistic religions. Over time, this notion of the cycle of ages was lost. Perhaps the Egyptians realized this loss of knowledge was inevitable and somehow tried to preserve it. We must remember that the inhabitants of earlier ages were not literal gods or supreme deities. They were humans that share our DNA, the same way we are not gods when compared to civilizations during medieval times. The ancient Egyptians were not gods, demigods, or aliens. They were humans, Homo sapiens. The question is not what did they know, but rather, what as a species did we forget? The yugas represent large cycles of time in which certain attitudes and beliefs are dominant. Unlike the zodiacal precessional model, the yugas are comprised of large and small cycles, representing different periods of time. In the Kali Yuga, lasting 1,000 years, human nature and consciousness is largely material-based. War, violence, and ignorance predominate this era, as human potential is at its lowest. In the following age, the Dwapara Yuga, human consciousness is said to expand beyond the material and into energetic form. This period lasts for 2,000 years. In this age, the average human mental capacity is said to be greatly enhanced. Human potential is upgraded, inexplicably. In the Treta Yuga, lasting 3,000 years, we enter the mental age. In the Satya Yuga, lasting 4,000 years, humans are able to comprehend all, even the spirit beyond this visible world. This is the age where humans attain peak development and attain God consciousness. This period is believed to be the golden age of human existence, without war or conflict. This half cycle of the yugas takes place over a span of 12,000 years, with the full cycle spanning 24,000, nearly similar to the great year of the total Earth's precessional cycle of 26,000 years. But like the mayfly, our lifespan is limited, and we can only witness a brief fragment of this grand cycle. When a yuga ascends or descends, there is a transitional period of 300 years before the effects of the yuga are felt, similar to the change of seasons. In other words, an immediate change does not happen at the flick of a switch, but rather a gradual accumulation of changes takes place as a new cycle commences. We are extremely fortunate to be born during the transitionary period between the Kali and Dwapara Yugas. The material age, the Kali Yuga, is said to have begun circa 3676 BCE, close to the end of the reign of the Shemsu-Hor and the end of the Dwapara Yuga. The reign of King Menes took place 500 years following the descent from the Dwapara Yuga and into the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is the epoch that saw mass starvation, poverty, war, famine, disease, and genocide. The Renaissance era, birth of democracy, the so-called peak of Western human achievements, were actually founded in humanity's darkest era. The Crusades, the Mongol Empire, World Wars I and II, the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, the Armenian genocide, slavery among others, all took place during the Kali Yuga. But we are currently on the cusp, arising out of the Kali Yuga and gradually into the Dwapara Yuga. In our emerging Yuga, we are said to transcend our physical bodies to harness invisible energies. If any of this sounds too far-fetched to you, and that transitioning out of the material world seems like a fringe, New Age idea, understand that it has already happened. Consider your intangible presence, your pictures, memories, personal data, financial information, all exist in some form online, along with those of your friends and family. This trend is becoming increasingly noticeable. We are transitioning out of our material form, placing more emphasis on our intangible, digital form. Based on this cycle, in the year 2020, we are exiting the Kali Yuga, material age, and entering the Dwapara Yuga, information age. We are currently within the 300-year transitionary period as we ascend out of the material and into energetic form. Via wireless technology and telephony, we have almost completely eliminated the barrier of geographical distance, thus transcending the limits of physical form. In the Dwapara Yuga, we have annihilated distance through an energetic network, connecting people across countries and continents. Large-scale wars and conflicts are at an all-time low, while literacy and education levels are at an all-time high. Satellite technology, telecommunications, telephony, radio, television. These are all developments that have only taken place within the last century. According to Moore's law, computing has only grown exponentially more complex since the trend was first observed in 1970. It will continue to do so without fail as our energetic network expands. Emerging technologies such as 5G networks, blockchain, Internet of Things, strong AI are the most recent developments. If you simply replace energy with electricity, you can grasp the trajectory of our current Dwapara Yuga. Our own human ancestors, including those in ancient Egypt, underwent similar energetic transitions. What of these so-called New Age beliefs were ancient potentials that we are just now beginning to rediscover? We are currently around 300 years into the Dwapara Yuga, leaving us with 2,100 more years of development to go. Imagine what other leaps we will make in the fields of AI, automation, and space exploration. The alleged Zep Tepi took place during the Satya Yuga. If during our current Dwapara Yuga we are able to transcend the obstacle of distance, is it somehow possible that in the Treta and Satya Yugas it was possible to transcend the obstacle of gravity, or maybe even time? We can only speculate. If you are still skeptical of the latent possibilities of the Golden Age, understand that centuries ago, our ancestors would have been equally skeptical of blockchain, AI, and broadband internet. Words such as download and upload would have been considered New Age and nonsensical only 100 years ago. Instead of getting caught up in whether or not these yugas were factual events, pay attention to the odd similarities that also appear in Egyptian culture. We know that the Hindu religion is one of the oldest religious doctrines in the world. The Yugas mention large periods of peak human potential that roughly correspond to the events of the Zep Tepi, the first time. Ancient Hindu and ancient Egyptian cultures vary drastically in terms of symbolism and geographic location, yet both cultures arrived at the exact conclusion regarding these large cycles of time. Understand, we are in an extremely unique position, being born in the transitionary period between the two yugas, allowing us to see two very different potentials of humanity within recorded history. So what does all this have to do with ancient Egypt? We already know that the Kali Yuga had us witness the lowest point of human potential. We also know that our entry into the Dwapara Yuga would jumpstart our energetic and technological development. From what we have witnessed firsthand, the potentials of two yugas have already been proven. What could have taken place in pre-dynastic Egypt during the Treta and Satya Yugas? Was it possible that the Neteru were the inhabitants of Egypt's Golden Age, who were then succeeded by the Shemsu-Hor in the Silver Age? We know that the Egyptians believed that the earth mirrored the heavens. We know that they saw the sun as a manifestation of Horus, their prime deity. Taking this into account, the followers of Horus, the Shemsu-Hor, were most likely a group of advanced astronomers who literally tracked the movement of the ecliptic of the sun, marking the equinoxes and solstices, tracing astronomical ages. This would all be the work of advanced astronomers who were literally tracking the movement of Horus himself. But if the sky-ground correlation in Giza takes place during the epoch of 10,500 BC, how does it make sense that the pyramids of Giza were built almost 8,000 years later? It's possible that the ground plan of the Great Pyramids was established in 10,500 BC, as if the grounds on which they were built were venerated as sacred spots. It should also be noted that the construction of the massive megalithic site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey also took place in the same epoch of 10,500 BC. In other words, the grounds which formed a physical alignment with the Belt of Orion in 10,500 BC were marked and cultivated by the Neteru or Shemsu-Hor, only to become the future building sites of the three pyramids. This has been confirmed by Professor I.E.S. Edwards, arguing that a great primeval mound exists underneath the natural outcropping of rock below the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The sites of the 4th Dynasty pyramids were deliberately chosen and venerated well in advance before their construction. The Temple of Edfu contains the majority of important writings on the time of Zep Tepi. It was built over a 200-year period between 237 BC and 57 BC. The writings in the temple mention an early primeval age and a great primeval mound from which the world supposedly originated. The Edfu building's texts also mention 7 sages, who were supposedly the only divine beings who knew how temples and sacred structures were to be created. These sages are said to have originated from an island named the homeland of the primeval ones. Are they somehow connected to the Neteru or the Shemsu-Hor? Strangely, the myth of 7 sages existing before a flood is also mentioned in Babylonian texts, the Apkallu, whose task it was to build the walls of Uruk to preserve knowledge. Similarly, the 7 sages of India, the Rishis, are believed to have survived the flood and were tasked with handing down information to future generations, preserving records of an epoch before the flood. The pattern is unmistakable. All of these myths do not speak of the creation of the world, but rather the continuation of human existence after a great cataclysm. These myths are not about the origins of human history, but rather a reboot of civilization, within a cycle of time so large it is invisible to the human eye. Beyond the dynasties, the kings of Egypt, the pyramids on the Gizan Acropolis, and the Great Sphinx itself, what if all these symbols and monuments were simply tools to mark specific times concerning the grand processional cycle? Understand, what we are dealing with is not aliens, nor an electronically advanced lost civilization. We are dealing with a lost window of time, where our ancestors were able to flourish using their full human potential. Keeping this in mind, what period of time do we fit into this grand cycle? Are we currently in our golden age? Have we peaked as a society and as a species? Are there major future advancements waiting to be discovered? Or are we in decline, slowly using up this planet's resources, waiting for the next global catastrophe before the cycle begins again, if at all? What would future civilizations say about our buildings, massive cities, and technologies? It could be that the entire Egyptian civilization was dedicated to preserving just one stage of this grand cycle, hoping that a future civilization would someday decipher its message. The entire Egyptian civilization is one fragment of a very, very large puzzle concerning human existence in relation to the cosmos. The pyramids of Giza and the Great Sphinx are only small compasses we have to navigate this vast ocean of space.